Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is our own pianist in residence, Sam Page. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And I want to make sure to thank people who've been sending in your very kind messages of appreciation. I appreciate you. I appreciate your messages. I appreciate your support. Louise and I actually both appreciate you very much. So thank you to all who have been sending your well wishes because they are very well received here. And thank you, Sam, because you've been part of the team now for about 6 months or so. So thank you for your contributions. This has been a good thing that you've been doing. You were a listener. Now you're a contributor on this side of the microphone. Oops, we lost Sam. All right. Well, here he comes.
Hello.
There.
Internet connected.
I was just thanking you, and then you went away. I mean, you don't go away when I'm thanking you. You can't do that. No, thank you for being the co-host here on the show for the last 6 months as part of my list of thank yous. And I think his screen just froze up again.
Seems that
oh
way.
Dear. We're having a few issues with Sam's connection. Okay, well, we'll let him get that straightened out. Meanwhile, I do have not one but two guests joining us today. We've got Jeremy Grater and Zach Taylor. They are the hosts of the Fit Mess. That's right, MESS, the Fit Mess podcast, which is a name that we're going to have to ask them about because I'm really curious where that one came from. But it turns out Zach is actually from my old stomping ground. I grew up in Schenectady, New York. He lives in Albany, New York, which is just a stone's throw away. So that was pretty cool to connect with you today, Zach, and find out, hey, there's somebody who actually lives in my old stomping ground. That's great.
I know. You asked me where I lived, and I was trying to figure out how much detail I should put into it because I don't normally do that.
And I was trying to figure out, do I remember where Fort Hunter is? Like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, now I remember. But yeah, it's been a while since I've been there. Well, that's not true. I visited my uncle. My uncle just turned 106 this year.
Wow.
Yeah, 106. And I went to visit him for his son's. His son was only 75 for his son's birthday party, and got to visit with him. And that's the
was it the usual clown and balloons as standard for the 75th birthday party?
Actually, no. There was no clown. There was no balloons. It was in a park actually. And Zach, you may know it, Central Park in Schenectady, not Central Park, New York City. This is the little tiny version in Schenectady.
Very different.
But that's where we had the party. It was great. So that's the last time I've been to Schenectady. But before that, it was like decades. So yeah, it's been a while, just to say.
Wow.
And Jeremy, you're from British Columbia.
A new Canadian. Yeah, I've only been in Canada for a little over a year now. Other than that,
okay.
Yeah, prior to that, I was in Seattle. I lived and grew up in the Seattle area my entire life.
And my Wednesday co-host Jody Lynn lives in Alberta, so there's a Canada connection going on there.
There we go.
So, yeah, cool stuff going on. So you guys, all right, I can't hold the suspense any longer. Where the heck does the Fit Mess come from? That's a great name.
Well, it actually comes from my ex-wife. We interesting enough. We Jeremy and I actually decided to do the podcast, and we had the concept and the idea of being vulnerable and talking about our mental and physical health and the struggle around how hard it is to be healthy these days with all the other responsibilities that go on in life. And we were just kind of throwing around all these things, and we had used fit and we had used messy, describing it. And my ex walked by one day and just nonchalantly just was like, why don't you just call it the Fit Mess? And continued walking. And Jeremy and I kind of looked at each other and went, huh, that fits everything that we were trying to describe.
So here you were, you've been working on it for hours on end, and your ex comes by and just kind of throws it aside and walks on by, and that was, okay.
Yep.
That's the way good ideas come. It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You think too hard about things and you overcomplicate it, and somebody else comes in and goes, hey, here's a real simple solution. And
exactly.
Turns out
and meanwhile, you're doing the V8 moment. Oh my God, why didn't I think of that?
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, very cool. So fitness, which and actually fitness can be messy. Let's be perfectly honest. It's not like fitness is something that, well, there are some people who try to dress up for it, but most of us are doing the gray flannel or the gray fleece material. This isn't like walking down the red carpet. So
no, I was just doing my yoga in my Katy Perry t-shirt and my ancient black, shorts. Nothing fancy here.
Right. So I mean, it's messy, and
yes,
it's not like it's hard necessarily. Well, it is if you think it is. I think that's probably the one thing that holds you back more than anything else if you're not doing it. But it takes effort. You have to kind of arrange things. You have to get yourself to go do it every day. You sweat up. You go take the shower afterward. Then you wash, rinse, repeat the next day. I mean, it's not neat and tidy.
That's just the physical fitness too, right? Like we talk about this all the time, that the mental gymnastics are the hardest part of the workout that you'll do all day long, is trying to figure out, when am I going to do it? What am I going to do? What's my plan? How am I going to fit this in between getting the kids to school and doing the thing for work, and my boss has a meeting at whenever? And when it's not something that's a habit, when it's not something that's just an automatic, that's part of your day, it's the first thing you do when you get out of bed, or it's the thing you do when you go on your lunch break, until it becomes habit, it just taking the first step of putting on the shoes or whatever it is really the hardest part of any workout.
As is true for anything that we endeavor to accomplish in life, mindset always coming first. And that it's always the topic that comes up on every episode. So we might as well bring it up first here.
That's
because mindset is so important. So I'm going to ask you my easy mindset question. On a scale of 1 to 100, how important do you think mindset is?
Well, with 100 being the most important, I would go with 100. It's
100.
I can't say it enough. There's nothing that I've accomplished in my life, and there's nothing that I will accomplish in my life without the proper mindset. If I don't have it, I do it half-assed, or just, I don't go into it with full purpose and intention. If you have the right mindset for something, it's going to happen. It's still going to be hard. It's still going to be a struggle, but that's the number one piece for me for anything that I do in my life.
So Zach thinks it's 100. How about you, Jeremy?
104.
Ooh, okay. So we're going to break the scale.
Got to be different, huh?
Got to stand out somehow. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, Zach said it. You can think and wish and hope and do all the things all day long, but until you actually make the decision that you are the person who goes to the gym, who drinks enough water, who goes to bed and gets 7 or 8 hours of sleep, like, until you make that decision, the rest of it is just sort of throwing darts, out your window and hoping that they hit a target somewhere, because you're just going to do what you saw on Instagram, or you're going to do, your friend said to do this diet, or your friend said to try doing this other workout program. But you have to make the decision that this is who I am as a person. This is a part of me, part of my identity, part of whatever this ego, blob is. And once you make that decision and commit to it, the rest, it becomes that habit that I was talking about, that just becomes that autopilot, mechanical response to the day, and whatever weight you're lifting or food you're eating, it just becomes easier because you've already made the decision. You've already done the hardest part.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you and Zach, you made the decision, you made the commitment to do this fitness/wellness podcast. But I'm guessing there was probably impetus behind it. This is not something that you were just kind of sitting over and saying, hey, let's do a podcast about fitness and wellness. So what's the backstory on this baby?
Well, I guess the backstory started for me, 43 years ago when I was born. In Cooperstown, as you were leaving Schenectady, right? You said you were in Schenectady in 79?
I was probably visiting that year, actually.
Yeah?
I'm not kidding. I probably was. Yeah, going to the Hall of Fame there.
Oh, all right. Well, I was just a couple of blocks over, helpless and dependent on other people.
Okay, there you go.
Now you're 43 and helpless and dependent on other people.
Yeah.
Love it.
For at least half the week. But yeah, no, I struggled my entire life with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, a lot of traumatic experiences as a child that, it took me a long time to work through them and become healthy. And I got to a point where I am healthy. There's a really long backstory that we won't go into right now unless you want to know details. But, I spent the better part of 20 years working on my mental health and being vulnerable with, professionals and working through all of my stuff. Along the way, I tried hundreds, if not thousands of things to manage my anxiety, my depression, my mental health, my physical health. And, a handful of things stuck and they worked. And I met Jeremy, and he was kind of going through a similar journey. And we started talking about how hard these things are. And we were being really open and vulnerable with each other. And guys don't do that. Generally speaking, they don't. And it was really helpful.
My handbook anyway. I mean, that's what they told us when I was growing up, right?
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. But we both kind of realized that like these conversations were super valuable. We were each growing bigger and faster than we would have if we weren't sharing these things. And just knowing that we weren't alone in some of these struggles. And it was just one day I went to Jeremy, who has years and years of podcast history. And I don't have any, but I was like, hey, these conversations we're having, it would be really useful if other people heard this and knew that they could be vulnerable and knew that they could talk about these things and, help them speed up their growth. And of course, Jeremy said, nope, not doing it.
So there's sounds like support.
Sounds like an awesome idea for someone else.
For someone else. So you took a little convincing and persuading, is what we're saying here.
Well, yeah, because I come from a news background, and so there's always got to be credentials. There's always got to be a degree, something hanging on the wall from the person that you're talking to, because that proves that they know a thing or two. And I kept going, I have no proof. I have no receipts that show that I know a thing or two. All I can do is talk about my experience. And I didn't see the value in that. And so I did, what I had learned to do at that point, and when I started doing a bunch of research and finding what are other podcasts in this space doing. And it turns out most of them were interviewing people that had things on their walls that said they knew a thing or two. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that combined with our vulnerability and our openness and our struggle and our stories could make for an interesting podcast. So let's explore this. And we got really lucky that a handful of people that we reached out to sort of on a whim to get launched were really big names in the space, and they agreed to come on. And when we sort of got their stamp of approval, I was like, okay, if they're cool with this, I can get on board. And so, yeah, from there, it's just been an absolute labor of love for the last, what are we on, year 4? On year 4?
4 years.
And yeah, and and then from there, when you start hearing from the audience, you start hearing from people that say, man, that really, the things you say changed my life. This person had a great perspective on whatever various form of trauma or whatever. When you hear from the people that you're trying to convince that they're not alone, that they find value in what you're sharing with them, it just stokes the flames to keep going and to keep doing it.
Do you guys find it odd, like I do, that we do as a culture, as a society, look for credentials, and we tend to ignore personal experience as if it doesn't really count? I mean, mm-hmm. I found that for quite some time. I remember struggling with the same concept, the same idea that you were struggling with when I first decided whether or not to go into business, let alone even do a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And it bothered me for the longest time until it finally dawned on me, where do credentials come from? Well, they come from colleges, university. Yeah, but where did they get them from? Oh, yeah. And that's and even getting it from real life.
Even that's that, right? You go to school and they give you a bunch of books to read, and then they prove that you read the books, and then they give you a piece of paper. And it's like, well, I don't need the proof that I read the books. I read the books. They're on my bookshelf. I remember them. I was there. I read
and the guys who wrote the books, where did they get the information from?
From somebody else who wrote books somewhere else.
And somewhere along the line, there was some experience. Unfortunately, they aren't all ivory tower types. Some of them actually have some real world experience. And to me, that's the credential. That's the real credential.
That's the thing that's been, the best part about this is feeling like, we hear from people that say, all the Instagram perfection I can't relate to that. That's not me. I don't get how those people got there. Right. You guys are in the fight with me every day. Like, you guys know what it's like. You understand this struggle. And that's what keeps them coming back to us, is because it's relatable. We're human beings that struggle, and this is not easy, no matter what Instagram tells you.
Interesting you should say that, because I have been feeling for quite some time that there is a shift that we as a culture are in the middle of. And by culture in this context, I mean the online culture. The online culture is a shift going on right now that most people don't even see, they aren't even aware of, but they're going to look back and say 20 years and say, yeah, that's when it was happening. And the shift that I'm seeing is one away from, I'll call it fake identity as a better way of describing it clearly. I'm not trying to disparage it. I'm simply saying that's like how I'm going to make it a sort of an extreme thing so I can understand it, as opposed to authenticity. And the authenticity comes from being real.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example from popular culture that I think really illustrates how this is happening. The Apple TV show, Ted Lasso. This is a show that was recommended to me by one of my other co-hosts. And I remember watching the first couple episodes and thinking, oh, great, it's another one of these, one-dimensional sitcoms. I can't handle this. And then all of a sudden, the characters started behaving like human beings. I said, what's going on here? I'm not used to this. This is great. I like this.
Yeah.
And it won all the Emmys as a result.
Yeah.
But it won those Emmys. I mean, I've heard a lot of explanations about why that show has done well. I think it won those Emmys because people like the reality of it. It's what reality TV actually isn't. It's real, even though it's fiction, which is so odd. The reality TV is supposedly about reality, but it's fictional. But the fictional is actually more real than the reality TV. Figure that one out.
Yeah. It took me a long time to really figure this out, but like, hiding behind things and pretending everything is okay and pretending that you love everything in your life. You really kind of continue to spiral in those situations. It's when you really open up and you become vulnerable and you actually speak the reality of whatever situation you're in. Like the people you need to help you start to show up. And the things that you need start to appear. It's, call it woo-woo or whatever. But like, I know for me, whenever I start speaking about these things and just making them known, like a person will come into my life who has skills in an area that I need help with.
You can speak that kind of woo here all the time you want. I mean, seriously, we're used to the woo around here.
I say woo-woo in a very loving manner. I love it very dearly. But I use the word, some people don't quite go that way. But when
you talk about law of attraction, you're kind of in the space anyway.
Right, so. You're kind of knee deep in it there.
Yeah. That's at that point, there's no point in drawing lines. Like, forget it.
Yeah, but and it's not necessarily woo woo too either. Like, I mean, there's a very, there's a very real thing about being vulnerable and open and being authentic about what's going on in your life to somebody because they might know somebody else who can help you with it. Right? It doesn't have to be law of attraction. It can just be. This person I'm talking to can help me directly.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's what's the saying? Attention goes where energy flows where attention goes. Well, you're giving attention, and the energy is flowing, and it's turning into more people giving attention. What a surprise!
Yeah. I mean, and our relationship is a good example of that. Prior to us connecting and talking about this, my podcast history prior to that was a show that I did for over a decade where. What got my attention was the beer in front of me and how much of it I could drink and how ridiculous the story was I could tell on the podcast to make people laugh. And so as a result, more depression, more sadness, just all this sort of heaviness that literally and figuratively weighed me down. And when I finally got to a point where I was kind of done with that life, but I didn't know where to go, that show ended and, in walks Zach and we start talking about the success that he was having because he was a year or two down the road, ahead of me. And when he was showing me the results he was having, all of a sudden that got my attention. And so everything that we then would talk to people about on our show became things I implemented in my life, which made me, get off of drinking. It made me start going to the gym. It made me eat better. It made me lose 70 pounds and, and start showing up better for my kids, showing up better for my wife. And, ultimately trying to build a life of intention rather than just sort of waking up and seeing what life threw at me that day. So it's absolutely true that that whatever you focus on, whatever you put your attention to is going to become the result of that work. Sometimes good or bad, but that's
sure. That's the challenge of it, right? Where are you giving your attention, right? You give your attention to something you don't like and you get more of what you don't like. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
You did that. Are you ready to own it? Yeah, that's the hard part.
That is the hard part.
And guess what? You can go back to your mindset on where you're going to be focusing your attention to.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's it. So I imagine that you guys, because you've been doing this show for 4 years, and Jeremy, you were doing another show for a number of years before that. Mm-hmm. I imagine you've experienced this phenomenon a lot. You talk about some experience of yours or some experience that a guest had, and it's on a subtopic that you really hadn't addressed before, but it kind of fits the overall topic. And then all of a sudden you get an email a few days later, what you were talking about, that's exactly what's going on in my life. Mm-hmm. That energetic transfer happens over and over again, and it's one of the best things about being a podcaster because you get to have a direct feedback on that you don't get from the rest of life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
To me, that's one of the most rewarding parts about being a podcaster.
I mean, and not even just in podcast. I mean, just there's little things that, you know, you can chalk them up to coincidence. You can chalk them up to whatever you want to. I'll use right now as an example. My schedule had to be changed. There's a bunch of work stuff, family stuff, all got moved around. And there was a point where my wife was going to be home. I record in the loft of our house, right? So it's always kind of awkward. I'm interrupting her. She's at work, whatever. And all day I was thinking, it's too bad she doesn't have somewhere to go a half an hour earlier, just so she doesn't have to deal with me doing this thing in the middle of the afternoon. And all of a sudden her friend calls her and says, "Hey, I'm early. Can you come and meet me a half an hour early?" Like, there's just weird stuff like that. And again, that, sure, coincidence, absolutely possible. But the fact that like I was like concentrating on it, going like, is there something that we need? Could I tell her to go pick something up in town that might make this easier on both of us? And then it just happened. Like, I have things like that happen all the time. And I try and just take a moment and be really grateful for, even though I didn't say it out loud, I didn't write it down, I didn't like energetically put it into the universe, just the thought enough, you know, assuming you subscribe to this, the thought enough was a thing that manifested into my life to make it a reality.
Yeah, for myself, the hardest part about accepting the whole LOA field was with the phrase, it's only a coincidence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had to take the word only out.
Yeah.
When I finally took the word only out, then all of a sudden everything started to make sense. But I was trying to minimize it. Well, it's merely a coincidence.
Right. How lucky.
Yeah.
How fortunate that just happened to go that way.
Right. But how about, well, of course it's a coincidence. Everything is coincidental.
Right.
Is there anything in life that is not coincidental? Please give me an example. Like, this event happened completely separate from everything else in the world.
Right.
No, that's not the way it works.
Right.
So of course it's all coincidence. How could it be anything else? It can't be anything else.
Right.
Yeah. But when you do direct your attention, I mean, Jeremy used a very simple example. I know last year the job that I had, I was absolutely miserable. Like, new management came in, I got a new boss, and it was not a good environment anymore. And I sat down and I very, very purposefully, you know, wrote down what I wanted for a new job and how I would feel when I got that new job. And I put I will say I put some pretty lofty goals into this new job. And like, I went above and beyond, thinking, you know, I'll shoot for the moon, but if I don't make it, you know, I'll hit the stars. Right. It all came to be within like weeks. Nice. It just fell on my lap. Everything I asked for showed up and then some. And it was just, you know, like even a year ago, and I'm very in tune with this stuff. I like walked around my house for like 3 days going, what the hell just happened?
I know that phrase. Yes. I know that one really well. I love that. I love that, especially that you're a male who made the list. It's always the women who are making the lists. You ever notice that? Mm-hmm. The women, they make the list of all the characteristics of the guy they want to meet or the job they want to have. The guys, it's like the guys don't ever seem to report that they're making the lists. So thank you for admitting that you're a guy who made a list and wrote it down.
Yeah.
And checked it and found that it worked.
Yeah. And ever since then, now there's lists all over my house. Because I was like, I just have to ask and I'll get whatever I want, which it doesn't quite work that way. But now I make lots of lists.
But it certainly does set you up to improve your chances of making it happen, because obviously it's your thought process that's driving the train here, and your thought process can contradict itself. So it's possible to contradict your own list, but there's something about writing it down that makes it harder to do it. I don't know why. It's just harder. If you've written it down, it's almost like you've placed your order with the universe, to use the phrase, but you've also committed to it. It's like, oh no, I wrote this down. This is mine now, so I can't go against it because I wrote it. And it's on paper and there's proof.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of an accountability, right? I mean,
right.
And like you said, guys don't tend to do this. So to go to the point of, I'm so serious about this that I'm going to put this energy into some sort of ink on some kind of paper or on some screen. That's a huge energetic push that doesn't normally happen. Normally we go, sit and stew in our heads for a while and argue about all the reasons it's going to work or not work, and then sort of leave it at that and get distracted by, whatever notification just binged on our phone.
Yeah, well, because we're human.
Yeah,
that's the human way of doing it, right? That's
exactly.
That's the default method.
Yeah.
So
I really as again, I don't think this is a common guy trait either. I really love taking the time to really explore what I want, right? Because if I'm going to write this down on paper, I need to be really clear about what I want, what's a need, what's an actual need, what do I want, and really examine myself and be curious about myself and figure that out before I write it down, but be okay with like changing it should the universe deliver the wrong order, but I like that part of just really, really digging deep and going, what is it that I really want here, and going beyond.
Was that always true for you, or did you have to learn that?
I had to learn that. I have so I have like really bad anxiety, and even to this day, when I tell people that I have anxiety, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're very cool, calm, and collected." Like one of the calmest people I've ever met, because I've got this mask that I wear all the time.
Sure.
And but my thought process was also in that realm too. It was just Spock from Star Trek was my idol. I wanted to just be logical, no emotions, and all of this new stuff is really, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I realized that like I spent my whole life trying to be logical and deny emotions and deny that path into the deeper recesses of my mind that I never wanted to go into. And I realized that I'm actually naturally like emotional. Like I have an emotional brain, a sensitive brain. So fortunately, I'm in a really good spot now because I actually have trained myself to be logical, and I can turn that on at a whim. But now I've been embracing this other side, which is my natural side, and it's just blossomed. Like I can't even explain how much it's blossomed. So now I can kind of flip-flop between the two. But no, I was never like that until recently, and now it's just a whole new world for me. It's like my whole life has been black and white, and now it's like this vibrant color.
Yes. You're like the audiences who saw the Wizard of Oz and saw color on the screen for the first time.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so cool. And you basically told my story, by the way.
Oh, really?
Literally, yeah. For the first 50 years of my life, I was that first Zach.
Yeah.
And I went through the same kind of transition you did and became the second Zach in a sense. And you're right. There's something about going through that. I think there's something special actually about somebody who has lived a significant portion of their life with everything closed up, and then they opened up. It somehow makes it more dramatic, more apparent when you start experiencing the emotions and acknowledging them and feeling them and actually liking them and saying, this is actually good. It's cool. I'm enjoying it. Not what I was fearing it was going to be. I think it gives it more texture, more flavor when you come that way. Not that I recommend going that route. I think it's always better to stay open, but I'm just saying there's something about that. I mean, there is.
Yeah.
That's my experience anyway. How about you, Jeremy? Did you have anything similar like that, or were you always like Mr. Open?
Well, no. I think it's different though. I don't think that I ever really had room for logic. For me, I grew up in a house where alcoholism was an issue, and so as a result, as much as possible, stay small, stay out of the way, don't cause trouble, basically don't exist as much as possible. And so that was the lesson that I carried with me pretty much my entire life was that there was no room for me. Right. And I'm 6'3", pushing 200 pounds. Like I'm a big dude.
I get it. I'm 6'8", and I was very.
Oh my God. So yeah. So
I know exactly what it's like to hide. Yeah.
There's something about being the biggest guy in the room that makes you feel like you have to suddenly become the smallest guy in the room. And then when on top of that, the emotional conditioning you have is if you speak up, there will be problems.
I went to a high school reunion a couple years ago, and the most popular girl in the class was standing next to me during the photo, and she looks up and she says, "I don't remember you being that tall." I mean, there's an example of it right there.
Because you walk around hunched, you hide in the corner, you don't go to the dance, you don't do all the things. So yeah, totally.
Yep.
So no, I've definitely always been very aware of my feelings, but I've never let them breathe because they were not welcome, either because that was what I believed or that's what I overheard in some way. So that's definitely something that I've had to adjust to just on this journey that has been, the better part of the last 10 years. And to sort of get back to what you guys were talking about in terms of sort of manifesting from a place of feeling, that has been the biggest sort of awakening for me in this space is that, you always hear, like someone always will say something like, oh, well, if you can just manifest whatever you want, why don't you just go manifest a lottery ticket win? Because it's not about the thing. It's about the feeling that will happen as a result of the thing that you need to happen. So when you go into whatever it is that you desire, whatever's missing from your life with the gratitude, with the existing gratitude for what whatever the feeling is that you will have that will be created by this change in your life, that's when the magnetic attraction starts to happen, because you're telling the universe, this is how it will feel for you and me, universe. We are connected. This is how we will feel together if this happens. And so you can't just manifest lottery tickets. You have to realize what it will feel like. And then even that will spark the action that you need to take to create that reality. So if it's, I need a better job, whatever it is, then all of a sudden you update your resume and you put it on LinkedIn or whatever. But you do these small things to make these things happen and make it easier for the universe to deliver the proper meal that you ordered when you wrote it down.
I love the way you said that, because that is one of the key items, the key elements that often gets left out in people's understanding, that you need to feel it. That feeling really is the secret to the whole thing, as Neville Goddard said. That the feeling of it, and it isn't that the feeling is doing the manifesting. The feeling, the way I like to describe it is, if you're driving the car, feeling is the gas pedal. That's how you apply the power to it. You still have to turn on the engine, you still have to steer the car, but you have to give it some power so you can get there.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, that's the way I like to think of it too. So okay, so you guys started this podcast. You got the difficult name figured out, so that was good. And you already had your background, so that was good. You started getting some top guests in, that was good. But what keeps you going? Because I'm curious to know if your answer is similar to mine. Because I did I did my first few hundred shows about law of attraction. I had pretty much covered it. Okay, what am I going to do now?
Right.
So what happened with you guys on that one?
So there's a couple of things. I think, one, every time we talk to, for me selfishly, every time we talk to a guest, it's like a one-on-one session that I can ask whatever I want, and I get that time with them. And then I walk away very energized about what we just talked about. And if it's something that I had done and I've been lacking on, I pick it back up. Or if it's something I've never tried, I'll, try it for the first time. I say all of this with the one caveat that we talk to so many people that it's impossible to do all the things. But I definitely am very selfish in the sense that I use it as an opportunity to keep me motivated personally in going down my health and wellness journey. But then on the other side of it, we've gotten reviews and emails and text messages from people that, like Jeremy said earlier, like, what you said or what happened on this one show changed my life. I'm doing everything differently. Like that feeling that I get from like even just one email, that would keep me going for like another year or two.
Yeah, that's potent. Yeah. How about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's the same. And I heard you say that, it's like an addiction that you don't need rehab for, right? Like it's this thing that it just makes you feel good to do it. And like Zach said, it's one-on-one with world-class experts, people that do have the thing on the wall, right? They've studied the thing. They've read all the books. I don't have to read those 30 books. They're going to summarize it for me in an hour, and I can pick their brain on how to make it work. And I think similar to what you were saying, Zach, is just it's accountability. If I show up on the microphone every week and tell people all you got to do is, and meanwhile I'm on the couch eating mac and cheese with Doritos in it or something, like, I'm a fraud and I'm going to feel horrible about it as a human being. And I'm going to, like, whatever existing imposter syndrome is just going to be completely amplified. So it's an incredible accountability tool, just, functionally, but it's also just, it's an education. It's a way to connect with people that need the connection. And, I think that any way we can do that, the more that we sort of drift apart as people, even if it is online and you're hearing me from 6 months ago or whatever, just creating more connection with people can only do good.
Boy, I love that. That's absolutely true, because connection does make everything better in every aspect of our lives. In fact, we're kind of touching here on another one of my favorite topics. I'm going to bring it up to get your guys' perspective on it. I personally believe that, yes, mindset totally is the first step. And I love the fact that you guys chimed in on that as well. To me, there are two key factors that help determine that, well, actually together, they combine together to completely determine whether or not we're going to be successful with anything in our lives. If it's, losing weight, improving our health, getting the better job, starting a business, whatever it is, I don't care what it is, getting into the best school, anything that's on your list. There are two things that really drive it, in my opinion, and I'm curious to know what your take is. The first is self-confidence. Self-confidence, self-love, self-esteem. How much do you qualify on that scale for yourself? And how real are you with yourself? I say that because, particularly for myself, in my teens, 20s, 30s, I really wasn't as honest with myself as I could have been. I thought I was. It's not like I was deliberately lying to myself, but as I look back, I realized I was kind of trying to talk myself into something that wasn't really there, that I really wasn't feeling. Because everybody else was confident, so I had to be confident. It was like I was trying to meet somebody else's standards. So that was one piece of it. And the other piece of it is what I call social connectedness. Who are you connected to in your life? And that goes back to the point you guys were just making about how connected you are to people and how valuable, as you said, Jeremy, how valuable those connections are. To me, that's the magic formula. Self-confidence combined with social connectedness. So that's my approach to how do you decide how to become most successful with whatever you want in your life. But do you guys have a formula of your own?
I don't know as if I have a formula of my own for that. I can speak to the self-confidence part. I think that is, you're right. I mean, that is huge. I think the definition of self-confidence is the piece that I really want to touch on, because it's, we're all afraid of things. We all come across something that, you're going to be afraid to do, or it's going to trigger something in you. So self-confidence for me anyway is, having the thought or impression that I can go do this regardless of the fear or adversity that I am actually going to be up against. And it's real, to say, you know what, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's adversity. There's a big mountain to climb here. I'm going to do it anyway. Just knowing that it's going to be a struggle, and that you're going to have to do it piece by piece. So absolutely agree. Confidence is a huge, huge thing for any of this, but knowing that your confidence can be shaken, and there's, confidence comes with fear. Confidence comes with adversity, and you have to learn how to just push through that and keep doing it and believe in yourself. So I just wanted to speak to that definition of what confidence is to me.
I like that.
Because in anything that we do, we're going to be afraid. There's going to be mountains to climb, and you just got to push through anyway.
And to me, the social connectedness is what helps to address that second part you just named. How do you push through? Well, your connectedness helps you do that. Your people who you're closest to, they're your coaches. They're your cheering section. Come on, you can do it, Zach. I know you can do it.
Yeah.
That's what helps you get through it. So,
absolutely.
Jeremy, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, I don't remember what movie it was, and maybe it's even a more famous quote than whatever movie I saw it in, but the term bravery sums it up. Bravery is being afraid and doing it anyways, right? Like that's what it comes down to. And, facing that mountain and all those things. Ryan Holiday is my favorite writer, and just hit the title of his book, The Obstacle is the Way, changed my life. The book is incredible, but just the title alone is something that I think at least once a day there will be something difficult, something scary, and that means I absolutely need to do it. But there's also with that, not only self-confidence, but self-awareness. And I like to use this analogy all the time because I know it bugs Zach. When it comes to
you're close when the other guy is saying, well, I know it bugs him, so I'm going to say
so I'm going to say it anyways. That's bravery.
Yeah, right. That too.
It's amusement parks. I had a fear of rides my entire life. Just there's no way that is something I checked off the list. I'm never going to do it. And one weekend, Zach dragged me down to Disneyland and forced me to get on a bunch of rides. And it turned out I had a pretty good time. But I know my limits, right? There are feelings that some rides create that I do not want to allow. Like I have no room for it in my body. It's not fun. It stops being an enjoyable experience. So I have enough self-awareness now that there will be some rides that I'll face and go, this is a fear. I should overcome this fear. This is a perfectly safe thing. It's not going to create that feeling that I don't like. Get over your fear and go do it. And when I do it, I'm super proud of myself. I add it to the pile of evidence that I usually ignore that says I can do hard things. And when I don't do it, it becomes the giant, thing hanging in front of my face that reminds me that I gave up. I didn't try. I should have learned the lesson. And that weighs so much more heavily on my mind than the small victories of I did the thing that was scary. And so you have to just keep stacking that list bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm dealing with this with my daughter. My 7-year-old daughter has just this incredible anxiety. And I never I talked to my therapist about this yesterday. I was like, I don't know how to relate to her because she's so scared of anything new and she freezes and just shuts down and cries. And I don't know how to get to prove to her that every time you do these things, I tell you, you're going to have a blast. And then you have a blast and you go, yeah, you were right. And my therapist said, yeah, she sounds exactly like you. What do you mean you don't know what to do? She's you. What are you talking about? And he's right. There's just all these things that we can't seem to learn the lessons because we don't make room for the wins. We only pay attention to the failures and the shortcomings because somehow they carry more weight and sort of prove that story that you tell yourself that you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you're not whatever. So it's really, really hard for me. So self-confidence is something that I lack to this day. And it's something that is definitely, you know, a daily struggle for me.
How interesting though, that you've decided to select regrets as your counterbalance, so to speak. You don't want to have those regrets. How did you say it? If it weighs on you, it just hangs over you. So yeah, you've made regrets into something. I definitely don't want that. And that's how I'm going to justify doing this other thing that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, because, and this is the lesson I've told my older daughter for 11 years now, is that almost 100% of the time you will regret the thing you didn't do more than the thing you did that went badly.
And of course, it's also one of those things you have to actually experience before you believe it, but it's true. It really is true. Yeah. Do you have a similar formula, Zach? Something that that kind of gives you that kick, like Jeremy's regrets gives him the kick?
Yeah, I do. This was something I learned from a therapist a long time ago. Every time I have like those moments of I can't do that, or I have a self-confidence issue, I look for evidence in my past that shows me that what I'm thinking is true. And just, you know, as an example, something about, you know, I did my MBA and I had to write a paper, and I had all these thoughts about, you know, I can't write this paper. This is out of my field that I'm good at. How am I supposed to do this? I can't do this. And like, I had this moment where I thought back to my bachelor degree, and I had to take classes that were irrelevant to anything that I have to do as an adult. And I wrote papers for that class too. Right. Mm-hmm. So just something similar in the past that I will look back to and say, look, there's evidence that you can do that. Look, there's evidence that you were afraid and you did it anyway and it worked out well. Look, there's evidence that you are kind of smart and you are successful and you can do that. It's going to work over here. So that's kind of my approach. I live on the anxiety side. I'm, you know, the way a professional put it to me, she was like, here's the top of the chart for anxiety and you are way up here.
Lovely. So
I'm constantly, you know, having the thoughts of what if, and fear of failure and things like that. So that's my trick, is I just always look back at all of my old wins and I say, look, there, you can do that. There's proof in the past that you can do this. And then I go forward and usually do the thing.
That's good. That's really good. I'm thinking about my own pattern. My pattern for years, you mentioned earlier, Zach, the whole thing about taking the logical, rational, the Spock live long and prosper route, which was actually the route that was drummed into me as a kid. I mean, you work hard all your life and you're going to be rewarded. And that was the path that I followed until 2008, when everything fell apart, despite the fact that I had followed the path perfectly. I had done every single thing that they said I was supposed to do on that path, and it all fell apart. I said, why did that happen? I don't understand this. That's not the way the rules of the game are laid out. Come on. If you're going to give me the rules of the game, give me the right rules, please.
Right.
It was one of those things. And it really threw me. When I look back on it, and even now I still wrestle with this, I find that I have an ongoing, well, I have a few ongoing struggles. One of them is I have a tendency to create problems. I'm really good at creating problems. I am less good at looking for solutions. Not that I don't know how to solve problems. I'm actually very good at solving problems. I'm excellent at solving problems, but I give most of my attention to the problem. Mm-hmm. And then I get hung up on the problem. And then the problem just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And then all of a sudden I can't find the solution because this problem is gigantic. It's enormous. Right. Nobody could possibly solve this problem because it's so big. All because I gave all the attention to the problem.
Yeah. So it's like we talked about earlier, right? Where your attention goes, energy flows. Or
there it is.
There it is.
Yeah. But it took me years to even notice the pattern.
Yeah.
So to me, when I hear Zach talking about how anxiety has been big so big that here's anxiety and he's up here. And you talk about how in your case it wasn't so much anxiety, it was the self-confidence thing. And I think to myself, how cool that you guys learned it, how cool that you guys recognized it, and you came to terms with it at forgive me for being ageist, at an age much younger than I did, because it took me 50 years to come to that conclusion. You guys did it long before that. I think, wow, that is so cool.
I think there was an awareness in the culture too, where, you know, you could tell a kid, yeah, you're depressed. And that's, you know, Zach likes to say that he lives in the future with his anxiety and I live in the past with my depression. And once a week we get together in the now and talk about it. So
I like that. Yeah, that's good.
It's very much what we do. You know, that so much of what drives me are the voices that I heard from, you know, adults in my life when I was a kid, and the things that I'm only just learning this. I mean, as much as we've been talking about limiting beliefs for the last 4 years on a microphone and several years before that, I'm only just really grasping the concept of hearing adults in my life saying things about themselves that I overheard as a child and went, well, if it's true for that person, then it's true for me. And that has driven everything that I think and feel and believe about myself for 45 years. And I very explicitly experienced this. My mom would kill me if I told this story, but we were at her house and my family had flown in from New York. Like, everyone got together. Everyone's got different dietary needs. She makes like 4 different lasagnas to meet everyone's dietary need. Lasagna, right? Like, not an easy thing to just whip up.
Right.
4 of them. And she's just, I'm in the kitchen. I'm hearing her dismiss, oh, this didn't turn out quite the way I hoped it would. This one's a little too watery. I hope that's okay. Literally, people are going back for 3rds and 4ths. And she's still like lowering the bar for everybody. Like, oh, it didn't quite do what I want. And I was just like, oh my God, that's the voice in my head. That's the thing that, like, I'm constantly, even coming into this interview, when I was setting up my computer, like, I was already preparing all the excuses for why the lighting was going to be bad and why, you know, like all these things were like, I was prepared, and I was just like, shut up. Yeah. You're fine. It looks great. You're going to say things and people will like it or they won't. And that's on them. But it was the most incredible thing to hear the voice in my head come out of somebody's mouth and pay attention and go, oh my God, that's why I believe all these things I believe about myself, because those people believed it about themselves 40 years ago.
And that conscious recognition is huge.
Oh, it's incredible.
Once you've got the conscious recognition, you can do something with it. Up until that point, it's like, I don't know what I do. What do I do with this filmy mess that I can't seem to make any sense out of?
I just believed that was the truth, right? No matter how many people would tell me, no, you're great. You're everybody loves you. You are deserving of love. You're worthy. You're great at everything you do. I'm like, yeah, you don't know. You don't know, because this guy, the one up here, he's constantly telling you that's not true. And when you realize that that's not this person, that's something else that was planted there a long time ago. It's just incredibly powerful.
It never ceases to amaze me how terribly we treat ourselves. You just described it beautifully right there. That voice that's up there. We just beat the crap out of ourselves
constantly.
I always I probably do it more often per day than I should be doing, but I will have those thoughts and I'll be beating myself up over something, and I'll stop in the middle of it and just say to myself, would you say the same things to your daughter?
Love it.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then it's like, okay, self-compassion, love yourself, you're fine, this and that. And I guess it depends on the day, because every now and again I want to say some of those things to my daughter, but I don't. But I it's amazing like how many times I stop myself in the day and hear the thoughts and say, nope, would you say that? No. Okay. And interrupt that programming that's been there since I was a kid.
Do you guys do what I do to notice that I'm doing that and stop and try to replace it with something reinforcing rather than, you know, affirmative and positive, rather than beating yourself up? Like, okay, I just beat myself about something. How can I turn that into something else? Do you ever try doing anything like that?
This has come up on our show. A few experts have been suggesting that lately. I haven't quite gotten there. I've just gotten to the point where one of our guests on a show that's coming up in a few weeks, actually, he was the one that said, when you hear that voice, just picture, I don't know, like Superman, somebody, it's your roommate. It's somebody literally sitting in the chair next to you. Get that voice out of your head and put it in them and tell them to stop talking. Just tell them to be quiet. And so I'm just getting to the point where I can recognize it soon enough to take it out of my head and tell it to be quiet. I haven't quite gotten to the, okay, now reach into the basket of positive thoughts and plug it in. So I'm just trying to celebrate the win of being able to go,
okay, well, that's good.
Not true. Be quiet. Go away.
No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
What I can tell you happens when you finally try it for the first time to actually replace the thought with something more positive and affirmative and reassuring and reaffirming, is it shocks the system.
Mm-hmm.
The cognitive dissonance goes on, and all of a sudden your brain says, well, that can't be true, and it tries to knock it out, and you say, well, yeah, actually it is true, and it knocks it back in, and it's like the tennis match starts playing.
Oh, man.
It's really weird. It's a very strange feeling. That's the first time. The second time it's less so. Third time even less than that. But that first time it's like, whoa, what just happened? Because the program, well, that's not the way the program goes. I know that program. I've lived with that one for years.
Right. I play that song perfectly. What are you talking
Absolutely.
about?
Yeah, but when you throw that monkey wrench in, and it's a pleasant monkey wrench, right? It's actually a kind one. Like kindness.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm not used to kindness. What do I do with kindness? For myself, I'm the one giving myself kindness? Holy cow.
Right.
So it's a shock, but it's a good shock. It's one of those shocks that you can actually, survive and thrive on, which is pretty cool. Where are you, Zach? I mean, have you tried applying that tool at all?
A little bit. I do have my moments. I told Jeremy about this, and I think I said it on one of our shows, so I have no problem saying it here. But I was kind of in the middle of like an intense situation at work, and I was doubting my abilities and somebody that I'd hired, and like I put this person together with my boss, and then they talked for an hour, and I wasn't part of the conversation, which is normal for me. I always like, people who I work with to have skip levels with my boss and things like that. But for some reason, this one was really bothering me, and my confidence was really questionable, I guess we could say. And standing in, and this was recently after I got divorced, so I was kind of feeling a little bit like I wasn't wanted in life in that moment. And I was standing in my kitchen, and I got like a text message. And I started thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? You're worried about all this stuff. Don't worry about it. You made the right decisions. You did the right things. You hired smart people. And just, put that different message in my head. And I was standing there, and I like looked up, and I saw my reflection in the oven, and like saw my body, which like I go to the gym a lot. So like I'm pretty proud of the fact that like I've got a muscular body, and I looked at my body, and I was like, damn. and then I got a text message from my boss going, this guy you hired is the best.
Ooh.
Like, right. And like both of those things hit me in that moment of like, I changed my thought pattern, and I just like started crying in my kitchen.
Wow.
Like, and I kind of felt it in my head where it just like went bonkers. It was crazy.
You had a new recognition that you hadn't had before.
Yeah.
It elicited an emotional response. That's great.
It was great. My Spock side was like, no. Put those tears away.
Yeah, here's the bottle that those go in. Now get
That's
out
right.
of here
Yes. I can't remember how Spock would say it, but it'd be something along the lines of he didn't have any time for emotion. It would just interfere with the logical process.
Yep.
I remember aspiring to that. Boy, was I messed up at that point. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Leonard Nimoy. You did a great job with the character. You did a beautiful job. Whoa. Well, I got to tell you guys, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying this a great deal. I wanted to give you a few moments to tell people about the podcast itself. Obviously the usual thing about how to find it and so forth, but just give us a little bit more about, what kinds of guests you have on, what are you trying to accomplish with each episode? Give us the lay of the land, so to speak.
Yeah, we've had some guests that I still can't believe that we've had. I mean, I mentioned Ryan Holiday is my favorite author, and the fact that we got to pick his brain for an hour just still blows me away.
Nice.
We talked to, the famous insanity trainer, Sean T, world famous biohacker, Dave Asprey, and then, from the meditation world, Sharon Salzberg and Daniel Siegel. Just, I mean, the list is just insane of people that we've been very, very fortunate to talk to. And it's a lot of this, right? It's a lot of just sort of sharing our experience, learning from them, what they've experimented with and what's worked for them, and what their followers are experiencing based on their teachings. And, I like to think of it as a way to give people a little bit of insight into these people that they're probably following online anyways, or doing their workouts or eating their diet plan or whatever it is, and trying to answer the questions we think that they would ask them, and then sharing our perspective on what has worked for us, or maybe why we haven't tried some of those things yet. So that's what we do. We open up, we share, we cry in our kitchen and talk about it, and tell you why, you know, ultimately that's okay for even guys to do. It's okay to cry in your kitchen, dudes. It's totally fine. So we do a lot of that, and we do that at thefitmess.com. So just make sure you spell it right, thefitmess.com. And we post new episodes every week, and we may be increasing that here in the very near future.
If you're enjoying it as much as I have enjoyed it, that I was doing it weekly, and then I went to doing it daily because it wasn't enough. I couldn't get enough of a fix. Because it's a serotonin fix. It's like, whoa, that feels great. Oh, that felt great again. Oh, it felt great again.
A true podcast junkie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I started my podcast, I've told my listeners many times, but I started it in 2012 because my business and my wife's business both got wiped out by the 2008 financial crisis at the same time.
Wow.
No income, zero income instantly. Yeah. And of course, in a financial crisis, you can't get a job. So it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And here's what we did. We spent 4 years going deeper and deeper into debt, and all the savings went away, and it was pretty miserable. So by the time 2012 came around, I needed help. I don't know what to do. Help me.
Yeah.
So, okay, I know. I'll start a podcast. I can't hire a coach. I can't afford that. I can't even buy a self-help book. I can't afford that, but I can do a podcast. That doesn't cost anything. And I can get guys to come on who are experts, and they can tell me for free. And it went great. And then after a few hundred episodes, I said, I like this. I wasn't expecting that part. This part's fun. Can we do more of these?
I thought you were going to say you turned to a podcast to make money, and everyone knows that that's a losing formula.
Well, actually, I know quite a few podcasters who make money doing it. But no, I actually made a conscious decision. I did go through, I think everybody does. You go through, well, do I want to monetize this? How do I want to monetize? Do I want to become a coach? All that. And I finally realized I don't want to monetize it. I mean, if money comes in, great. I will certainly appreciate it and receive it and all that. But I don't want to spoil it. To me, if I turn it into a business model, that spoils it.
Yeah.
I saw that with my wife. My wife loves gardening, and I run her gardening business for her now. She's actually retired from it. And it actually burned her out running the business side of it, to the point where she lost her love of gardening. It wasn't until she actually retired that she found the love of gardening again, because she didn't have to do it as a business.
Right. Now that happens all the time. That my wife she knows tons of people in the art community. Same thing. Like once it becomes a job, it stops being a creative, fun outlet. So that's definitely a reality in this space too.
Yeah. So that's why I decided consciously not to make it into a business. And I'm glad I did, because this is like my energy fix every day.
That's awesome.
Talking to guys like you like this is just, I'll be buzzing after this for like the next few hours just because.
That's awesome.
Same here.
Yeah. And well, you probably get the same thing when you do your podcast, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you start spinning again. The story starts going in your head of, okay, how do I do more of that? How do I bring that into my life? How do I feel like this all the time? Yeah.
Well, that's the goal. That's the real goal. That's the true abundance. They talk about abundance. That's abundance.
Yeah.
When you're living day to day with joy, that's abundance. I don't care what's going on physically in your life.
Yeah.
That's the real abundance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Zach, thank you very much for sharing a geographical space with me, and then coming on to share a virtual space here on the show.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, the same with you. And I wish you guys all the best of luck and happiness and joy with the Fit Mess podcast. Just keep doing it, guys.
Thank you. And thank you, Sam, for your contribution.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sam's had a lot of trouble with internet connections, and we thought we had it ironed out.
No worries. It happens to the best of us. No worries.
We'll get it next time. We'll get it straight out. One of these times it'll just be perfect from that point on. It'll be good. But that's right. It's like our first episode. But the first episode of LOA Today was, now we're live here on LOA Today.
Right.
That's the way it all started. Right?
Yeah,
that's so funny.
All right, guys. Oh, and one other thing I got to do too. I've been making a process of doing this on a regular basis, and I didn't want to skip it today, especially in this case. You guys, as podcasters, reach lots and lots of people like we do here on this show. You reach people that you'll never meet, you'll never see. You touch their lives. You give them ideas they haven't thought of. You give them perspectives that they never even looked at before. You help them in ways that you'll never know about. And you should be thanked for that. So on their behalf, thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you're continuing to do with your podcast. And I hope you just keep doing it for the rest of your lives, because you are giving great gifts to society by doing it.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to take that clip and I'm just going to play it over and over and over again. And
there you go.
Computer for the rest of the day.
I love it. I love it. Yes, another win. This is great stuff.
You can use that line to replace all of your other thoughts.
Exactly. That'll be my new positive messaging. There we go.
Yes, I love that. Excellent. Just put in your own voice. It's more effective that way.
True.
Yeah. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.